Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, True Drews, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. And I have a legitimate question for you all. Do you ever do this thing where you think one word and then you say a completely different word? Because that's what I did in last week's episode. I was talking about her interactive computer games and how some of the puzzles, people either like them or don't like them, and I said that it was all objective, and I definitely meant to say subjective, but yeah. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. You know, it actually took longer to explain that than it would have to edit it, but I was already done editing the episode, and I was like, you know what? No, it's good. It's fine. What can I say? Sometimes I'm doing these episodes super early in the morning or super late at night, so my command of the English language is not at its strongest. But anyways, on to the episode at hand today. We are on our 15th episode of this podcast, and we're going to be discussing The Message in a Hollow Oak. And that is the 12th book in the Nancy Drew series. My laptop is also currently at 39% battery life, and I'm not anywhere near an outlet, so I like to live life on the edge, if you know what I'm saying. So let's jump right into it. So The Message in the Hollow Oak was written in 1935, and we've got a couple covers to discuss. Also, if you ever want to check out these book covers before the episode, I will post these on my Instagram, True Drew Podcast, on Wednesday, the day before the episode airs. So in the first edition of this cover, we have the Russell Tandy cover, and Nancy is wearing a brown dress and a blue jacket that's kind of got a turned up collar. It's honestly a very cute look. Like, I would wear this. I would wear this outfit. And she's got the short blonde waved hair. She's got a strange looking man behind her. I don't know who that's supposed to be, but he's wearing a red jacket and a gray hat. Actually, you know what? That might be the guy Clem that's in this book that shows Nancy around the woods quite a few times. But she's looking on at this guy who's wearing a checkered vest and like a golf caddy looking hat. And he appears to be digging in the ground. As for the second edition of this cover, it's very similar, but Nancy has the red hair. She's got some very tailored looking black jeans and a green blazer. She means business, even though she's in the woods. And she's again got that guy who I'm assuming is Clem behind her, and they're looking on as this guy's digging in the ground. I'm assuming it's Kit Cadle. Now, the third edition of this cover is the one that I grew up with, the flashlight edition, and we have Nancy's disembodied head in the hole of a tree with a skull. It looks kind of ominous. And then we have the PF initials. The guy, is it Pierre? I don't know. Francois, this French-Canadian missionary, that's his initials, and these plaques are a big part of the plot of this book. Now, I did come up with a funny cover spoof for this book, The Revised Vision, and I said, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this has to do with a tree. And then the second cover spoof that I came up with is The Mystery of the Bonsai Tree. Get it? Because there's a skull and there's, bonsai. Is it? Okay. What can I say? I love me a good tree pun. But back to the revised cover, Nancy and that skull, it looks very ominous and creepy, but trust me, everything's going to be just pine. I may pull a few more puns out. Like, are you sick of more of these tree puns? You thought I was done? Birch, please. I cracked myself up. But anyway, so the cover rating for this book, I wrote down 4 magnifying glasses, but you know what? I think I'm going to tick that back to 3 magnifying glasses because it's okay. They're just okay. I kind of tend to not like the covers where Nancy's head is just floating in the middle of the air with nothing, supporting it. It's a little bit weird. So I'm going to say 3 magnifying glass rating on the covers. Now, as for the characters in this book, we have Eloise Drew, Robert Lightfoot, Boise Osborne, who's a detective, Kit Cadle / Tom Wilson, Julie Carswell, who is Ned's cousin, and there's also this guy named Art, who is on this archaeological dig team in the story, and then there's Clem, who is Nancy's just unofficial official guide into the woods. Also, I just recently saw the musical Into the Woods a few days ago, and so I'm going to try and refrain from singing that, but it keeps popping up into my head as I'm recording this. Oh my gosh, I just got a brilliant idea. I feel like we need a Nancy Drew musical. Has that happened? I feel like it should have happened. If it hasn't happened, it needs to. Sorry, I keep branching off into other subjects, so let's go straight to the synopsis. Nancy gets a call from her Aunt Eloise, who has a detective friend who is stumped. Get it? Okay. He is trying to find a hollow oak that some Canadian missionary, Père Francois, probably butchered that, left a note in, but no idea why. He just says it's a message of great importance, but also warns her someone named Kit Cadle could cause trouble for her. Nancy, through Ned's connections, gets room and board with his cousin Julie for this mystery, who is on an archaeological dig of some Native American burial mounds. Nancy is shown a few possible trees that could be contenders for the hollow oak and finds a plaque with Francois' name on it. Her guide, Clem, also gives her a good luck coin, which belonged to the missionary. A helicopter flies over them while doing this, and the next day, Art drives Nancy to the airfield where she finds out Tom Wilson was the one in the helicopter. She's suspicious it is Kit Cadle in disguise, and this is confirmed the next night when Tom, quote-unquote, is caught near the burial ground and takes off running after previously having a limp. Police come to investigate, along with Robert Lightfoot, a Native American who says a strange man with a limp bought a ladder from him. He tells Nancy that Francois' message is so important because it leads to a treasure. He thinks the treasure was stolen by pirates years ago. Nancy reunites with Bess, George, Bert, Dave, and Ned, and they charter a boat to the pirates' cave amidst also trying to find Bob, someone kidnapped from the research team. Then there's a long sequence of nothing, followed by notes from Bob, and finally he's found and Cadle is arrested. The treasure turns out to be a hunting horn and directions to another Native American burial ground. So, the newspaper headline synopsis that I came up with is Teen Detective Solves Mystery of Missing French Missionaries' Treasure for a Group of Men Who Are Inept, which is basically this whole book. Like, we basically have Boise Osborne, the inept detective, to thank for this mystery. He just basically threw his arms up and was like, I give up. Nancy, will you go find where this hollow oak is? I don't know if you can already tell from the way that I'm reading this if I like this book, but I'll just give you a hint. I really didn't like this book. Now, on to some of the direct quotes and things I noticed from the message in the hollow oak. So, the first note that I took down is that Aunt Eloise says that this mystery involves going to Illinois. So, this kind of debunks the theory that that's where River Heights is. There's always been this argument within the Nancy Drew community, where is River Heights? And some people have speculated New York, Illinois. Some people have made a strong case for Iowa, and that's actually where Mildred Ward Benson is from, or was from. And so I find this is strong evidence that River Heights is not in Illinois. My next note just says, a goat gets into Nancy's room at the farmhouse where the archaeological dig is going on and tries to eat the cookies Bess gave her. And this is on behalf of Kit Cadle. He puts a goat in her room to scare her, apparently, is what is found out later in the book. And I was like, really? It's a goat? Like, I wouldn't be scared of a goat. I mean, maybe if I woke up and it was 2 inches from my face, but goats in general are not that scary. Honestly, the way it was described in the book was way more sinister. It was talking about eyes looking at her, and I thought it was going to be way scarier, but it was just a goat, so I kind of had to laugh. So the next thing I wrote down is some farmer named Clem, who actually turns out to be the owner of the goat, says they make such a to-do about taking care of cemeteries, but they sure ain't got no respect for the skeletons of folks that lived around here 300 or 400 years ago. Right on, Clem. I don't know, I feel like this book was probably a lot more disrespectful in the original than in the revised. I haven't read the original, so I can't speak to that, but I feel like this book was really towing that line of being disrespectful with the dealing of Native American human remains. Now, my next note just says, Clem's wife Hortense makes the best beaten biscuits you ever ate with a fishball inside them. Ew. I was like, that sounds so disgusting. Like, who says you want some biscuits with some fish balls in them? That's, ugh, gag. It's kind of unfortunate, but fish balls is all we get in this book. There's no What's Cooking with Hannah Gruen because Nancy was, of course, away and solving a mystery, so we didn't get any of her good home cooking. We just get Hortense's fish balls and a biscuit. My next note says Nancy knows some French because she translates what's on Clem's lucky coin that he gives her. It's interesting to me how sometimes in the books, Nancy either progresses or regresses as far as her language knowledge. Like sometimes she'll be like, I know Russian and Swahili, and then other times she's like, I don't know even basic English, so she apparently knows French in this book. My next note just says Nancy goes for a ride on Art's motorcycle. So Art is Nancy's, well, he likes Nancy. Nancy, of course, is completely oblivious to him other than the fact then when she's riding on his motorcycle, but Ned is super jealous of him, which comes up later. And apparently Art's pretty jealous of Ned too because he makes a comment when Nancy says her friends are coming and he says, at any rate, I'll like Bess and George. Yikes. So he's like, yeah, not a fan of Ned. I feel like Harriet likes to put these little instances in the books where it's like, Nancy's so desirable. Look at all these people fighting over her. Just like as a reminder, like Nancy could have anyone she wants, but she's sticking with Ned. It's also kind of funny because Bess tries to intervene and help Nancy out with the Art-Ned situation, and she pushes Art at Julie, Ned's cousin. So that's kind of entertaining. But my next note says, Ned has also been selling insurance, apparently. It mentions this, and I feel like it mentions it in another book, but yeah, he's out there selling Progressive. The very next thing that I wrote down is the case of the missing lunch, because some boys come by and they steal the group's lunch, and George is such a jerk to Bess, because Bess is upset, obviously, because she's hungry, and George says, it wouldn't hurt you to go without a meal. Like, I'm sorry, I want to push George in a hole sometimes. The next thing that I wrote down was two men pretending to be cops try to stop the archaeological dig and take the artifacts, but Bess tells them George knows judo, and thinking they mean a guy named George, they just leave. I love that they don't even stick around. They're just like, oh, there's some guy named George and he knows judo. They don't even wait for this person to appear. They're just like, okay, we're going to leave now. Honestly, the villains in this book are very stupid, and that's my next note. It says that Kit Cadle is so stupid. He makes a sign saying that the Hollow Oak treasure is at the bottom of a quarry, and he honestly expects Nancy to believe it and dive down there and find it. I'm just like, what is this? It's like Roadrunner all over again, like those dumb cartoons, and this guy, I mean, he wears a hokey disguise. He's just ridiculous. I half expected this guy to be twirling like an imaginary mustache. It was that bad. Now, my final note says that Bob, he's the guy that gets kidnapped from this archaeological dig, gets a ham radio signal out. He's tired of waiting for someone to rescue him because honestly, this part of the book was so annoying. They would search for him for like an hour and then they would be like, okay, we're done. And then they'd go back to like searching for the Hollow Oak, and I'm like, this guy is missing. I mean, granted, he's with some of the most dumb criminals and they're probably playing checkers with him. They're not, harming him by any means, but still, like, I would keep searching for him, like, and use the same effort that you're applying to this archaeological dig to finding your coworker. Like, I don't know. This book was frustrating. So for the add that to your resume section, I put trajectory tracer because Nancy puts her ear to the ground to hear which way Kit Cadle went. I'm like, how large is this man though? Because like you couldn't hear him that far off. I don't know. Like that skill only works if you have supersonic hearing or something. And the last thing that I said that Nancy could put on her resume is novice archaeologist, because she finds all these finger bones and toe bones and stuff, and she's just like, look at this. So yeah, I guess she's a regular Indiana Jones. So for the things I liked, I seriously just wrote down, I really couldn't tell you. This was not a good book. I'm saying this in the nicest way possible. This was a dud. For the things I didn't like, I wrote, Kit Cadle is a stupid villain. And he really was. Like, he dressed up in disguises, and not very good ones. He wrote notes and was like, go down to the bottom of the quarry. That's where the Hollow Oak is. Like, thinking Nancy would be stupid enough to listen. And he just, I don't know. He was just not the brightest criminal. I also didn't like all the desecration of Native American burial grounds. It's being done by a university, I think, but it's very unclear as to what they're doing with it. Are they profiting from this? Like, is it going to a museum? What's happening? That was a little weird. It was never really explained, and I think that was for a reason. Also, this book had a weird postscript at the end, and I've never seen this in a Nancy Drew book, but honestly, it was a bit like trying to wrap up a Law & Order SVU episode, and it just said, "The Hopewell Mound was excavated the following summer, and many artifacts and fossils were found. There's a luncheon celebration, and Nancy was praised for having added valuable information to the archaeological knowledge of America." Like, why is Nancy getting credit for this? She was there for like 5 minutes, and for the majority of the time, she found like one finger bone, and then the rest of the time, she's out looking for these plaques that were left by this strange, obscure French-Canadian missionary. Like, why does she get all the credit for changing the topography of archaeological America? I was like, this, really? Fine, whatever, let's just go with it. Also, while we're talking about this missionary, it's very unclear. Like, it seemed like there was some borderline stealing of artifacts from the native people, and then the treasure leads to another Native American burial ground, and that's the quote-unquote treasure. And I don't know. This book, it was such a stretch. I had to suspend my disbelief several times. So yeah, if this is one of your favorite Nancy Drew books, I would love to talk over on Instagram if you want to, build your case as to why. But it was not one of my favorites. I felt like this was really a dud, and that's kind of unfortunate because there are some like that just fall flat, and then there's some that are really, really good. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. But yeah, I think officially I gave this book a 1 magnifying glass rating. I didn't like the villain. I didn't like the motive for anything. I didn't like the mystery itself. I thought that it was a bit weird and honestly just not a good book. So that concludes this episode for The Message in the Hollow Oak. And next week's episode, we're going to be talking about the mystery of the Ivory Charm. I have some strong feelings about this one too. So you'll have to prepare yourself for that episode as well. But I hope you all liked this episode. I hope you liked my tree puns. I feel like they were better than the book itself. But anyway, until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. If you'd like to stay up to date on the latest information and new episodes, our Instagram is True Drew Podcast. Or for general inquiries, you can email us at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com.